Hey everyone, it's Jamison Cable of the Land Between the Meadows Kentucky History Podcast. I just want to say thank you for your support and listening to this episode. For all the updates on our podcast and YouTube channel, youtube.com/Kentucky History Channel, like and follow us on Twitter and Facebook at KY History Pod. If you're enjoying the podcast, give us a good rating and review on Apple Podcasts or the podcast platform that you're listening to. If you're looking for ways to support the podcast, an easy and simple way is to share it on Facebook or any other social media and tell your friends. You can also go to audibletrial.com/KYHistoryPod and get a free book of your choice. And finally, you can visit patreon.com/KYHistoryPod if you want extra content from us. If you're already a patron, thank you for your support. It means so much to us. All the links I've mentioned are in the description of the podcast, so go check them out. Thanks again for listening. I hope you enjoy this episode. And remember, if it's not about Kentucky, it ain't worth a hill of beans. This podcast is a production of the Cable Podcast Network.
In the pines, where the sun never shines, you'll shiver when the cold wind blows. There's a grave in the pines where the sun never shines. There's a grave that's shaded with the pines.
Welcome back to the Land Between the Meadows. This is our East to West Part 2 discussion. Me and Mr. Pope want to thank everybody for listening and supporting the podcast. Please keep sharing our podcast on social media. If you want to follow us on Twitter, at KY History Pod. You can connect to us that way too. Thanks again for all the support and enjoy the rest of our discussion. Alright, so here's a one that we plan on covering soon, or not this, probably won't be soon, but did Kentucky, and this can be, I mean, it's a straightforward answer, but there is some gray area for this one. Did Kentucky join the South?
No,
they did not.
No.
Now,
they were one of 3 or 4 slave states that were part of the North.
Now, the argument or the counter to that is back whenever Kentucky wasn't joining the South, there was a group of men who went into Bowling Green and had a conference, and they said, we're joining the South.
That's right. We're becoming the new capital of Kentucky.
Yeah. So, but obviously that's not how it really works. I can't just go out to my house and have a vote with my family to say, hey, we're a new country or we're a new state. That's not really how it works. So, no, Kentucky did not join the South.
That's right.
What do you got next?
You go ahead.
Let me go ahead?
Yeah.
This is
good.
This is an easy one. What were some of the major industries over time in Kentucky?
Well, of course, we said tobacco. And we said horse racing, bourbon, the growing of hemp, especially World War I, World War II. Used it for rope. They weren't using it as massage oil like they do today. Cures all. Hogs. Early on, sheep. Kentucky was the number 1 state for spring lambs in the whole United States. And do you know what caused the downfall of the sheep industry?
I do not.
2 things. They used to make the interior of cars out of wool.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
And they quit making it. They started using synthetics. And they were dependent on Kentucky wool for that.
There you go.
Yeah. And then a lot of things that as cities begin to expand and there begin to be subdivisions with the invention of the car and so forth.
Yes.
Dogs coming out of subdivisions, killing the farmer's sheep.
Oh, okay.
And so that was a problem too.
There you go, wild dogs.
Wild dogs, or tame dogs. Your neighbor's dogs.
Tame dogs. Wanting to be wild.
Yeah, wanting to be wild. That's right.
All right, let me go again?
Yeah, just keep going.
All right. What part of Kentucky is not connected to the state?
It's down in western Kentucky. It's called the banana capital of the world for some reason. I think they haul bananas up there and distribute them. And it's where the earthquake that Tecumseh talked about that severed it.
Yep.
That's what caused it geologically. New Madrid.
The New Madrid, yeah. Also known as the Kentucky Bend, because the river bends around.
That's
and it goes that way.
It's part of the Jackson Purchase.
Yep, and it's so interesting. It was really made that way to be part of Kentucky, all kind of by accident.
Yes.
Or they established that the Commonwealth of Kentucky's southwest border was to be on like 39 degrees of that longitude. Yeah, the longitude and of the line and of east of Mississippi, and that part is just randomly.
They grow a lot of cotton down there. in that part of Kentucky.
Yeah.
A lot of hogs and corn. You know, I used to tell my students, kind of exaggerate, I'd say, you know, we talk about Western Kentucky or the Jackson Purchase. You know, we think about, like, what do you think of the bluegrass? You know, and you think, you know, racehorses. They all shout out, you know, and I'd say, well, what do you think of the knobs? They'd say trees, you know, fruit trees or something. And maybe Eastern Kentucky, they'd say mountains or coal or something. And I'd say Jackson Purchase, and everybody would yell, hogs. You know, I'd tell them the corn grew 15 feet high. Everybody raised hogs. I said, you can tell when you're in the Jackson Purchase because you can roll down the windows of your car and you can smell them. The huge feedlots of hogs. You know, methane gas. It just chokes you out. It's a terrible thing. It's actually pretty neat. It's the kind of thing I like. Well, I like to learn about Kentucky. You know, I don't know as much about Eastern Kentucky, and I really love Eastern Kentucky, and I wish I knew a lot more. You know, there's so many beautiful places there, and it's so natural. And even when I was designing those questions at the first of the podcast, you know, I wanted to show that, you know, Kentucky is so different. You know, the different regions of Kentucky, the bluegrass particularly, from the Appalachian Mountains and coal fields, and yet, you know, when you say something like Fayette Mall or shopping malls, and you say something like Dollar General, you know, really, I'd rather be at Dollar General. You know, I'd rather be eating brown beans and cornbread than, you know, a $50 meal in downtown Lexington or something, you know? I mean, the simple living, you know, is something that really appeals to me. And I really like, you know, simplicity is nothing to apologize for. It's something to be proud of. I think.
I agree.
I mean, that's just, I think the complexity of our world is sick.
Well, continuing on with...
You better cut me off. Because I'll tell you what, I got one more thing to say. I've had it.
Continuing on with our questions, we talked about the new Madrid Bend and the Kentucky Bend.
Yeah.
In the mid-1800s, Tennessee tried to take it.
Oh, I'm sure.
They wanted it.
Just like them. Just like they try to win us in basketball. They can't do it. They're sorry.
So they wanted that little part, which is unique because that Tennessee is the only connection to. Those people have to drive through Tennessee to get to Kentucky.
That's right.
There's not a lot of people, I don't think, that live there. There's also a feud, a Darnell versus Watson feud, which I couldn't find much else about. That was just mentioned. Maybe we'll get to that one day. What's another question you have?
I don't have any more.
Oh, you don't have any more? Oh. All right, well, I'll keep going with some of mine. When was the first Kentucky Derby?
It was after the Civil War, and let's see, Aristides, is that how you pronounce it, won it? I'm going to guess 1868. I'm just guessing.
Close.
67.
Close, getting warmer. No, actually getting
Wrong
colder.
way, 69.
Nope.
70.
72.
75.
1875. Yep. That's the first one. Now, what's the rumor around here in Crab Orchard is that the first Kentucky Derby could have been in Crab Orchard. The Kentucky Derby could have happened.
I don't know about a Kentucky Derby, but the first horse racing track that ran counterclockwise was at William Whitley House. It may have been the first, I think it was the first racetrack west of the Appalachian Mountains. Was right here at William Whitley at Sportsman's Hill.
Sportsman's Hill, yep.
And the women would come out with their parasols and sit on the hill and eat fried chicken, and the racehorses would go around the hill, kind of a knob that stuck up, like a big Indian mound or something. And they would race.
Why did they race counterclockwise?
Because the British ran clockwise, and they didn't want to be anything like the British. And so all North American racehorse tracks run counterclockwise as a protest in the Revolutionary War. They didn't want to be like the British.
Which is a lot. I mean, the British in England, and I mean Europe in general has a lot of horse racing.
William Whitley went up to the Ohio River and caught these white perch that he called trout and brought them down and would serve them. He was famous for them. He hauled them all the way from the Ohio River.
Wow.
Yeah, and they had bear. They had certain meals that he would put on.
Bear.
Yeah, and then John Hunt Morgan's, you know, what do they call them? The Lexington Greens.
Yeah.
Greenies. They would come down on Sunday afternoon to Crab Orchard, and they would race horses and flirt and date the girls down here. There's supposed to be a lot of hot women around Crab Orchard. And they would put on their carriages, you know, with parasols and all, and they'd have parades. And, of course, they had the springs here during that time, the health springs, the spas.
Yeah.
It was quite a place. They had a railroad train that came here.
Yeah, oh yeah. Well,
drove down from Chicago. They had bottled drinks here. They had a tavern, Crab Orchard, that had a jug, like we were talking about, those whiskey jugs.
Crab Orchard Springs Hotel.
They had 7 of them.
Yeah, wow.
7 different hotels.
Wow.
About all of them burnt down over time, but they were quite. They had golf course.
Yeah.
Man, they had it going.
Yeah.
The gentry of the South would come up here. The Saratoga of the South, they'd call it. Hang out and go fox hunting at night. They had various activities.
Is there your regular old Gatlinburg?
Yeah, it was. It was a regular old Gatlinburg here. You know, it really was. I'm looking out behind this windows behind our school. Yeah. That's where the golf course was.
Yeah, that's cool.
Right out there, man.
All right, another question. Well, speaking of fires and burning places down.
Yeah. Right.
How many state buildings have been built?
State buildings?
Like Capitol buildings.
In Kentucky?
Yes, in Kentucky.
2.
Are you sure?
No.
No?
I'm guessing.
4.
4.
And of course, the other ones I think burned down. But 1830 was the 4th. 1830, I think, was the 4th, or maybe it was the 3rd, because the 4th one would have been the new one was built in like 1910 or something. The one that stands now. And of course, I could be completely inaccurate, but
I bet you are.
That's what I got.
I bet you aren't.
And I don't know if that includes moving the building. Like say, the building in Danville was considered the Capitol building.
Oh, okay.
That could be be one of them.
The tavern.
Yeah. All right. So this is a good one to finish with as far as my questions go.
Okay.
Why is Kentucky nicknamed the Dark and Bloody Ground?
Well, we talked about Native Americans and how they came into Kentucky. The Shawnee from the north, the Cherokee from the south, the Wyandot, even part of the Iroquois tribe came down this way, and they loved to hunt in Kentucky.
Yeah.
There were, of course, at times there were villages in Kentucky and places that they lived along the rivers and so forth. But they fought each other. It was like recreation, like the NFL Super Bowl or something. Yeah. They came down and men proved themselves by fighting, and so they called it the Dark and Bloody Ground because different tribes claimed Kentucky, had different names for Kentucky. They fought over it and they called it the Dark and Bloody Ground.
So did that nickname originate basically from Native Americans,
yes,
or battling with the Native Americans?
I think it came from Native Americans first, would be my understanding. Maybe it was an observation that early frontiersmen made. They may have also called it the Dark and Bloody Ground because they knew different tribes came, following the different warriors' paths and so forth into Kentucky. That this was a meeting ground. We talked when we talked early on about the villages and how women did most of the work and tilling the fields and the corn, the squash and so forth, the beans.
Yeah.
The men would go out, and disappear for 3 months at a time. Well, a lot of times they'd hike over the mountains or go over the river and come into Kentucky, into the middle ground, they oftentimes call it.
Yeah.
Land between the meadows, the middle ground, and fight.
Yeah.
Woohoo.
Woo.
Yeah.
Let's get them.
Let's get them, boys. I don't know what it is about the male, but, that like they didn't have anything else better to do. They also came here and traded with each other, too, sometimes.
Yeah.
There were certain areas that were big trading spots that Native Americans would meet, and even the frontiersmen would meet and trade. Speaking about Native Americans, do you know what one of the main foods that they ate that archaeologists have found? I mean, I know you think deer, wild turkey, blah, blah, blah.
I was going to say squash
rivers.
Or something like that.
Yeah, squash, yeah. Fried squash.
Yeah.
Clams.
Clams, really?
Yeah.
Wow. Huh.
Yeah. Freshwater clams, we don't have them because their water's so polluted, but you can file what they call trash piles. You can file piles of clams, just the shells that they threw on the side of the village, trash piles, mounds of them. And if you, again, go to the Kentucky History Museum, you'll see they show pictures of huge mounds of clamshells where they get from the river. And even in winter, when hunting was scarce and there weren't very many animals, they found that they would dive along the Green River into the icy water to get clams off the bottom of the river. They found that around the eardrum that there was calcification of some, and of others there wasn't. And I think they found that it was the women that were jumping into the water naked and swimming, and the cold, frigid water damaged and had calcification to their skulls.
Wow.
because they were jumping in the water,
freezing.
Yeah, skinny dipping, trying to get food.
Yeah,
and again, it would be the women, the men would be sitting around. Well, I ain't getting in there. Of course, they didn't want their children to die.
Yeah.
So they would jump in the water.
Wow, that is very interesting.
Yeah.
So let's think about here the next.
I have a 5-gallon bucket of bones.
Wow.
That that I used to show my class, and they were dug out of in Casey County near the Green River. They were dug out of a rock shelter.
Yeah.
And we've tried to identify. It was food, bones that were back in a rock shelter that the Indians had been eating. We found a lot of bird bones. Probably passenger pigeons, turkeys.
Yeah.
Things that don't necessarily exist right now. Of course, there were deer bones. Of course, there were lots of clam shells. It's really interesting because I used to spread them out on a table and have students try to identify what kind of bones they were. Whether they were mountain lions or what. So it's kind of interesting.
It is.
Knowing what they ate and what foods were available because things change.
Yeah.
Things change.
Well, think about what we're eating today compared to 15
one
years ago.
One of the things I thought about too, I was going to talk about. I read somewhere, and this is just so unprofessional of me, and I don't even know the exact year. I'm going to guess again, but I'm going to say it was like around the 1890s. We had a squirrel plague.
Oh, really?
In Kentucky.
Yeah.
And certain counties had a bounty on squirrels, and evidently a whole bunch of squirrels over in Missouri, they swam the Mississippi River. I'm talking millions of them. Gray squirrels and fox squirrels. And they invaded the cornfields. And they totally destroyed one year's corn. There's no bourbon made that year. and they just like swarmed the cornfields.
Yeah.
And they had a bounty like 5 cents for a pelt. For every squirrel pelt.
So big.
And people went out and shot them with long rifles and stuff. Big squirrel purge, man. It really was. And they were just like the fields and the trees were just crawling with squirrels like locusts.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's kind of interesting.
That is crazy.
Yeah, I thought
that is a.
I should have asked you what purge hit Kentucky. Squirrel purge.
Yeah.
But they had bounties on them, and newspaper articles I read about where they, old George Brown was claiming, 50 squirrel pelts or something, or 100 or something. Got $5.
You'd think that might have depleted the population, but they're still all running around.
They're still running around, but they just came out of nowhere, man. Squirrels.
Missouri squirrels.
Missouri squirrels. SOBs.
We'll come over and get our nuts.
That's a good one to end on.
All right.
Yeah, they're not going to get our nuts.
Yeah. All right. Well, so as we said before, we will be on a hiatus.
We'll try to clean this show up.
Yeah. We'll get our morals back together.
Yeah, we'll try over Christmas.
Over Christmas, and we'll be back in January to delve deeper into the agricultural time of Kentucky between, I guess we could call the first part of this podcast the frontiers.
Yes.
Settling.
It's called the Golden Age of Kentucky. The Golden Age of Kentucky.
All right. And we'll move in. You're saying the frontier part is called the Golden Age?
No.
The new part.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're going into the Golden Age
of agriculture.
Of agriculture in Kentucky. And which we have a lot. There's a lot to get into there, too. We'll have to start setting up the groundwork. And eventually, after that, I guess we'll move into the Civil War part of it, of Kentucky's involvement, which will be very complex as well. And so stay tuned. We'll be back, I guess, in the new year in 2020. So hopefully,
Lord helping and the creek don't rise.
Yeah. And help us spread the word. Share our links on Facebook. And
we don't drink too much over Christmas.
Follow us on Twitter. Again, that's KY History Pod. On Twitter, so you can join us there, and we'll hopefully grow our listeners and provide more engaging, in-depth content here on the land between the meadows.
All right.
Anything else, Mr. Pope?
No, sir.
All right. That's all. I'd like to thank all of our listeners out there who support the show by listening to each and every episode. We couldn't do it without you. From all across the U.S., we thank you for the support. If you would like to join the conversation and give your thoughts on this podcast and other episodes, join the Cable Podcast Network group on Facebook. If you are enjoying the content of this podcast, consider visiting anchor.fm The Meadows, KY History /support. You can also find this link in the show's description, or check out the Cable Podcast Network Patreon page. If you want to help this podcast grow in other ways, like the Cable Podcast Network page on Facebook and share our links on all social media outlets. You can find the Cable Podcast Network on Facebook, Tumblr, and Twitter. If you're listening to this podcast on iTunes, give us a positive review and leave a comment. Thanks again for all your support.